Just giving everybody I appreciate you guys. So welcome back, guys. Have another live stream for you guys. I thought that was important. I want to address the topic, and I'm going to kind of just chat for you guys for a little bit, and then actually get into some of the stuff content I want to actually react to. But at first, I kind of want to give my perspective and kind of talk about this. I was going to make a standalone video about it, but I just thought, like, want to be better to interact with you guys, get involved, the chat involved, and actually kind of get their perspectives like real time, so I can kind of think, okay, is this actually going where you guys want to see, or am I just like kind of like shouting into the void? So today's topic is going to be the toxic nature of construction sites and construction period, just like the overall vibes. Um, I get a lot of comments about how people quit because the trades are too stressful, or people quit because their foremans were being rude to them, or their journeymen, and they weren't treated with respect, and so they ended up leaving the field and they were happier, greener pasture. So I want to know what has been your perspective and what are your thoughts. If you're in the trades, let me know what your experience has been, and if you're thinking about the trades, like what are some of the things that you fear? What are some of the things that you've heard before that kind of like make you apprehensive about joining the trade? So let me know in the comment section. I'm just going to start off. I recently was listening to some videos on YouTube. There's some other creators that are kind of small like me that were talking about their experience with construction and how it's like really negative and toxic. They have a lot of like ex-military vets in there, felons, people who are ex like drug addicts, and pretty much like the dregs of society, people who like, have a hard time following any other job field but construction. They might kind of come into it and then leave. They might come into it and then leave, and then get high on the weekends and those kind of things. So a lot of people have a really negative experience with people who work in construction. So I kind of want to know what your perspectives are. I think that if you are a military vet or a felon alike, I think that the trades offer a great opportunity, especially if you're in the military. You have that background of that hierarchy of having uh, a superintendent, a foreman, a journeyman, and then an apprentice. It definitely slots in pretty good, following like chain of command, procedures. You're giving a task every day. And so I can definitely see how that can be beneficial and why a lot of military people do kind of do gravitate towards. And there are some programs that actually help people who were in the military get in, and they start off as like a second term opposed to starting fresh, because you assume that if you've been in the military, you have the at least, the bottom threshold of being able to show up on time, being able to follow directions. And so that's even a benefit and a positive for you if you were in the military before. Now, when it comes to felons, obviously, I haven't really been afraid to tell you guys that I do have some felonies. I made some mistakes in the past. And so having the ability to actually be able to improve my life through the trades has definitely been a blessing. And I've been really blessed to be able to have a family, really elevate my life and be able to see things that I think, maybe I would never have been had the opportunity without the trade. So I think that, yes, there are some negatives when it comes to people who have more unsavory backgrounds, the way they talk, the way they act. It's not always going to be as wholesome, especially if you come from like a suburban two-parent household and you've been really sheltered. Being in construction, you're going to see a lot more like crassness, people being very vulgar, people being super negative sometimes. And so for me, I kind of grew up more in the trenches a little bit, and then I kind of moved to suburbs later on. But just seeing, men like just acting negative, that wasn't really something that really, offended me that much. My philosophy is words don't matter. Until you get physical, that I don't really care. And so for the most part, I haven't really experienced that yet. So even though I have had some negative interactions, as long as people are keeping hands to themselves and they're not like, spraying bodily fluids like spit, or doing other weird things like that, I'm pretty for the most part all right with how everything is going so far. So let me guys know what have been some of your experiences. Have you seen it be super negative or not? And so also, one of the things that I think I kind of look at is I've done a lot of really rough jobs, as far as like I've been like a janitor, custodian when I was younger. I tried to sell newspapers. I've done wildland forest fighting. I've planted trees in the wintertime. And so because I have a vast experience of doing a lot more hard, really arduous stuff, I look at the trades as, especially being in the union, it's not that hard. It's not that bad. I mean, there are so many other things in this world that are so much more difficult. So I kind of always keep that in perspective, especially when I'm really, having a down moment and I think like, man, this is really bad. I'm thinking, well, you've been way lower and you've made way less. And so I kind of always think about that. And also, there's always an opportunity to get lower. You know what I'm saying? Like, say you're in like in a really negative situation, things can get worse. There is no point where like things can't get aggressively worst when it comes to your circumstances. So I kind of always kind of have that gratitude in my mind, like, you know what, I still have all my faculties, all my senses, and so I'm always going to keep that mindset. But I do understand that if you come from a different background, if you haven't experienced, some of the things that I have, that you're going to look at certain things with a culture shock, and then with that lens, you're also going to view things a lot differently because you can only gauge things based off what you experience, right? And so I also think that because of that, you have to keep that in mind. Like a lot of guys are coming from a experience where, they may have gotten beaten down. They may have abusive parents. They may have drug addict parents, and so they bring all that things onto the job site. They bring all that baggage, and so you maybe as a clean cut person or a more sheltered person, you're not going to understand exactly why they're doing the things they do because again, this industry is thousands of years old, but we've only started getting more like progressive and more sensitive. I want to say like maybe in the last like 15 to 20 years. And so a lot of guys grew up like where if you didn't wear your nail bags, they were like, nailing them up to something. They were throwing them around. They were tossing your stuff. So some just real vulgar traditions were built up in the trades, and they still want to pass those down because, if they got those negative experiences, they want to make sure that all the new guys get the same thing. And I think that's not really a great way to move about life. The same way as a parent, if my parents, did things to me that I didn't like, it's not my job to then, jump on my kids and do the same thing to them because they have to get their licks. They have to get their share of, the negativity in life. So I try to keep that balance and keep that in mind. So I want to go to some of the things I was reading on Reddit, and they were talking about some of this stuff. And I kind of want to go read some of the articles or read some of the posts, and then I'm gonna give my input, and then I'm gonna read some of the comments and see like, does this stuff resonate with you, or am I by myself alone? Let me see. So let's go to the reaction section. Okay, so let's go to this first article, and it says toxic industry for young guys. It says this guy is named Sad Understanding. He says, I have a little over 3 years in construction industry working for a GC in the Tri-City area, and I wish I knew how bad the industry is. Don't get me wrong, I love my job and learning something new every day, learning and drawing, negotiating with the subs and clients and talking to the trades. Seeing the job being built and everything coming together is probably the most satisfying thing there is. However, I'm tired of the stupid culture of you're so inexperienced, you don't know what you're talking about because you were so young and you have almost no experience. My blood boils when I see plenty of idiots who just walk the job site and talk about how they have 10, 20, 30 years of experience in industry and don't even fucking look at the drawings. Just parading while yelling and acting tough, making small things huge issues, finding problems and no solutions. One thing I want to talk about too, which I also have seen, is there is a inclination for a lot of guys, especially for subs, to find a problem and then like want to like jet out and leave. Like I don't know if they get paid for the rest of the day, but I've seen so many like subcontractors, they find a problem with the job site. Instead of trying to find a solution, they're like, listen, if this isn't done, boom, 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 right on time, we're out of here. And it's like, do you guys get paid, just based off the job, or do you guys get paid based off the hour, especially for like, the employees? This is not the owner. This is like, maybe their foreman coming in and saying, that's not right. So we have to leave. And it's like, well, we still have a schedule. Can you wait here 30 minutes? Can we have some guys like maybe move some material out the way for you? And they're like, nope, it's not done when we should have been done. So we're out of here. And it's like, I don't know how you can make a profitable business. Everything can't be perfect, especially when you have, you're working for a bigger company. You have so many moving parts. Everything is not going to be, set out there. And I can understand that some GCs may take advantage of you as a subcontractor. They may, kind of put you in the back burner. And then like, once you want to get to your materials or your access your area to work, that, they haven't really given you the proper, venue to do your work. But at the same time, there's got to be like a give and take. And I think a lot of times people are just so quick to just like fly off the handles. They're like, you know what, this isn't how I want it to be at the time that I want it to be. So you know what, I'm out of here. I've seen guys like throw equipment, just like throw tantrums. I think sometimes like, are you drunk? Like, are you drunk right now? Did you really come like inebriated? Because the way you're acting is like so irrational. I can't understand how somebody with like a functioning brain would come to a job site and be so angry, always like on their haunches so quickly when it's like it's a small thing. Like, okay, listen, we'll get the forklift. We'll lift the material up for you. We'll get it to your area. It's fine. You know what I mean? Some of the things are really simple, and guys like to really get their blood pressure up so high when it really doesn't have to be, to that extreme all the time. So back to that little article. So not sure if all the young guys out there working in the industry feel the same way, but it's mentally tiring. I just come to deal with the fact that I just need to take it on the chin and deal with the stupidity while learning and absorbing as much as I can when I finally get that 10 to 20 to 30 years experience and finally have a seat at the table. I can be everything these idiots claim to be. I have had great managers who've had some fun, who have learned I've learned so much from, and who really want your input and listen to what you have to say. However, some others are so caught up in their ways, it's almost sad, and but yet frustrating. Perhaps I care too much about my job, and you shouldn't. Not sure what to think of. So, also at the same time, you have to think about it like this way too, because so many people have like a muscle memory of like how they do things, and like once they get out of that like narrow like routine, they just like really have a hard time adjusting. And I think that's one thing that's really going to really stagnate our industry and to stagnate the culture period is like guys who are really close minded because they've had a certain way of doing things for so long and it's worked kind of. Because I mean honestly, if things were working perfectly, then there wouldn't be no trade, there would be no changes. Like you don't have to reinvent the wheel if everything is working the way it should be. But again, we're humans, we're flawed. We don't make perfect solutions to any problem. So there are ways how we can improve. There are ways we can innovate. There are ways we can take our experiences from other places and bring those in, especially when it talks about like incorporating technology, especially when it talks about like bringing like youth and innovation into our trades. We don't want to make the industry so hostile towards like young people that, they don't want to join. And you might think like, well, fuck them. I mean, they're young. Who cares about them? But at the same time, like that is the lifeblood of our industry. We have to have young people coming in. Everything in life pretty much is a pyramid scheme, whether you like it or not, whether it's our nation, whether it's our industries, whether it's our job sites. You need to have a certain amount of people at the bottom who are learning, who are a little bit cheaper, who are working, who are getting that experience that, are going to be able to do some of the tougher tasks when it comes to like the body work, the more manual labor task. And then like as they're learning, they're getting higher up and you want to have people come behind you. Because again, our pensions, our retirement funds, all those depend on young people being satisfied with our industry. So if you want to be so close minded, think like, listen, I don't care about anybody behind me or younger than me. I'm just going to do things my way. It's like, well, good luck funding your pension. Good luck funding your social security because you need those young people to take care of us when we get older. And that's why I think it's really important for industry. I'm always going to advocate for young people because, again, I am still young, but I do see it both ways. Like I'm a journeyman, but I also was an apprentice, and I was an apprentice in the first term, and at the bottom rung where I had to give, just my body every single day because I didn't know anything. So I can understand it from both terms, and I'm not so far, removed from being an apprentice that I've forgotten where I came from. So in this, one of the comments I thought was really good. They said, "What you're describing is not limited to construction. There's a point in time where decades of experience mattered. You got better, and the better, the longer you did something. But this industry, as well as others industries, are undergoing radical changes from advancing technology. You're dealing with older guys who respected and listened to their elders, expecting the tables would eventually turn. And now these same guys don't know how to complete their daily reports on company apps. They don't know how to view PDF plans and drawings on their tablets. Even tools are advancing. For instance, brazing a plumb joint used to be an art they took a while to master. Now, with PEX, I don't even know what this is. Anything can make a watertight joint with 15 minutes of training. They're feeling more threatened because they're realizing they have to keep up learning and they're not as mentally agile as they used to be. But at the same time, it's happening to every industry. Some of these young people are starting out are likely going to be the bosses in a few years. And yes, the right thing is to remember this is coming from a place of insecurity. You show up to do your job and let them tire themselves out. And do remember, they still have stuff to teach you. I think that's definitely true when it comes to them some stuff to teach you, but also like if you are a younger apprentice and you really start getting involved in like the technology side, like the blue beam and the plan view side, and really getting like the background particulars really down and pat, you're gonna pass like older guys who refuse to adapt, who refuse to adjust their styles. You're gonna pass them up. I've actually worked with some apprentices. She was a female apprentice that started the same time I did, and now she's a superintendent. Like she's pretty much just jumped all the way up pretty quickly because she got the more background particulars a lot down. Like I know a lot of journeymen or foremen that are really good with like actually building the material, but they don't know how to read blueprints on tablets. They're not very good with communication. They're not very good with the scheduling. And so, if you can master some of those tertiary, those some of those outside factors, you're gonna pass a lot of these guys on because some guys are only good for building stuff, and some people are better at managing stuff. And it just so happens that managing pays more than just being a builder. So, as a young person, uh, a lot of us are going to be more like digitally native, and so you're going to have an easier time like navigating new programs or going home and watching YouTube videos and then figure some of these things out. And where a lot of the older guys who maybe go home and drink, they're going to have a harder time keeping up with you, and so you're going to run circles around them if you keep your head in the game and understand that everything happens for like a cycle, right? Where, innovation comes and it kind of destroys old things and then it becomes a new standard. So a lot of these older things that people are trying to hold on to and grasp because they're afraid of the next cycle, they're gonna get left behind. Honestly, like if you can't read, your prints on a tablet, a lot of times the mistakes are happening because you're using the wrong set of prints. Like that could be something catastrophically done wrong because you're not staying up to date with technology. And so that's something that a lot of older people definitely are going to be dealing with. That like younger people are definitely going to be thriving in this industry if you see what's coming down the pipeline and then jumping ahead and really investing more on those things. You're definitely going to be like ahead of a lot of these older guys. Says, have you worked? Yeah, it says, have you worked for Hoffman Structures before? I've never worked for Hoffman as a general, but I have worked for Hoffman and Anderson as a subcontractor. So I know, like, I've been through all the orientations. I've worked on some of their jobs. They're definitely a lot bigger, and I definitely get the vibe that, like, it's more about like a number. It's more about like, getting things done really quickly. And then, like, once you're done with your task, you're out of here. And so, I mean, again, there's drawbacks and there's pluses. Like maybe you might be on that job site for 2 years, and so you may learn a lot of things about that aspect of construction. But I work for a smaller outfit, so I kind of get the a different outlook. It said, and some people also comment, it's like it's not okay. It's just all around. Construction is just one of the last fields to change with the times, and I think again that's also true because it's dominated by older people. Like you don't see a lot of like technology, like social media firms, a lot of like engineering jobs. They're not as they're not as heavily dominated by like older like boomers, and because of that, they have a different vibe. They have a different like skill set, and they have a different mindset too. They're more open to things. They're more open for input because they realize that if you don't stay innovating, you're going to get crushed by competition. So I think a lot of guys also, one of the things that you see in our industry that is not like common in a lot of other ones is with the constant layoffs that constantly happen. What you work at a job and then like the last man standing, it's like the king of the hill. Well, with that mindset, it's like, well, why would I help guys, take my job? Like, why would I help somebody younger than me have the ability to, usurp my job? So a lot of guys are wanting to hold back and they don't want to give you everything because, again, all they have is that experience. All they have is that knowledge. So that's the only thing they have over your young body. Like, if you have a young body and all the experience and knowledge, you're going to blow past them. So a lot of guys do have like a poverty mindset of like, well, I can't make it in this industry if I give away all of my tips and tricks. But what I've noticed too is for the guys who are really, really competent, the guys who are really, really good, they never really have that mindset because they realize that the company is going to appreciate them for how good they are and how good they train too. Like if you can train up apprentices to, be able to be more productive than what their pay scale is, you're valuable. You know what I mean? Like you're going to have a value uh, that's going to extend past what you actually can build. Like if you're training up a third term apprentice, but he's doing like 6 term apprentice like output, you are an asset. You know what I mean? And so I think guys gotta start thinking like that. Like you are not just your body. You are not just you swinging your hammer. You are everything that you bring to the table every day. You know what I mean? And so once you have that mindset, I think that things start to change. And also, once you become like a master carpenter, like it's easier for you to like start your own company, do your own thing, like, and then you have that experience to fall back on. So you have to stop. You have to just stop thinking about things on just like what you're doing, but also like how you actually influence others and how you contribute to a company. And if they're a good company, they're going to see the value in you outside of just like, the basics of how many nails did you pound in with your hammer? How many joists did you hang? Like, there's more to the construction than just that. So let's go to this next Reddit post, and it says, toxic work environments of bullying the new guy. Why do we do this? The idea of weeding out those who are soft by endlessly bullying them is archaic and fucking stupid. Zero point to it. There's places in the world where the toxic culture has played a role in a spike of suicides for men. We are men. We all have issues that we do not talk about, and some of us go to work to just be verbally abused on to be verbally abused to shit by builders, bosses, coworkers, etc. Men have to work in order to provide, and if you are wired to believe you need to be in a trade, but you can't handle the bullshit, then what else are you gonna do? You're gonna reach a breaking point. Either it's flipping the fuck out, cussing everybody, cussing everyone, and walking off site, or blowing your brains out. Wrestling has the same culture 20 years ago. Everyone hated each other, pulled pranks, fought, bullied, and beat the shit out of the new green wrestlers. This culture changed and shifted, and it's up to date. Guys like JBL are going to expose the pieces of shit they are for what they are. Why can't this happen in the trades? Nothing will ever change, and most of the people on the site will be miserable pricks and who need to take it out on someone else. It's time to grow up, be decent human beings, and control your emotions. The trades have less people interested in them because of their reputations of being toxic. Just tired of having to deal with the bullshit and having to constantly be around negative BS. No one's smiling unless I'm pissed off and raise my voice back. For what fucking purpose? It's all pointless mind games that remind me of high school, man. And I'm not gonna lie to you. I do think there is like a high school like pack mentality of like anytime anybody shows weakness, like anytime that you can let somebody's words get under your skin, people are gonna prod and poke at that because again, a lot of people that do join the trades, it seems like they have a very high level of disagreeable, like their disagreeability is very high. Maybe they're very industrious, but they like to prod and poke and see where someone's weak and they like really pounce on that really hard. And I'm not exactly sure, like, does that lead to better workers? I don't know. Like I haven't been in industry like long enough to say like, doing a double blind study where I have guys be assholes and guys not be. I think a lot of people just follow traditions of, you know, this company does, negative things. And so I'm just gonna keep that on. I know there's some local companies in Oregon where they have a reputation of like everybody's constantly yelling at everybody. Everybody's constantly being cussed out, reamed out all the time. And then you have a lot of guys like not want to go there because of just like the negativity. And some people thrive in it. Like I think that's the issue too. Is like a lot of these guys on maybe Reddit maybe might tend to be more like maybe a little more sensitive. Let's be honest, just because they're on the internet and they're venting their feelings and those kind of things. And there's some guys who really thrive in like that negative environment where everybody's cussing, people want to fight, and it just like boosts up their energy and their morale, and they like it. So it is difficult to gauge on like is this going to work long term. But as we can see, you obviously can see that for a look for to a certain extent it's not working because people are not wanting to join the trades. People are not looking at this as opportunity to change their life, even though we do get paid fairly well. And it says, dear experienced tradesman, it's perfectly fine to teach new guys how to do something when they start a job. Watching them do something wrong and then flipping out about it just pisses off both of us. Manual labor is hard enough already without the extra bullshit. Thank you. And this guy said, when I first joined a rough carpentry crew at 17, the foreman spent the first half of my first day teaching me just all the neat tricks they knew. He told me it was important to keep up with the old school guys. Something. The strongest muscle is the brain. I can't imagine being a new guy in a shitty group. That should be your second family. I mean, also the fact that we are at the job site so long, we are with these guys. You have to trust the guys you're next to, and I think that's a little bit a part of it. Like same thing in the military. If you show to be really weak, and they pick at you and prod at you, and you break, a lot of guys are going to assume that if the pressure was really high, like we had a really big concrete pour and things started going to shit, and you just had like a panic attack when we needed you, they'd much rather try to weed you out before it got to that point. Now, I'm not sure if that's apples to apples works. Like, hey, if you can't take a joke, then therefore you can't work long hours. I'm not sure if that's applicable, but I think that's a lot of guys' mentality. Like, if you are not able to survive under, stressful environments, then when we really need you to work, long hours, when we really need you when the pressure's on, like when the deadline's coming and the concrete's coming, whether we're ready or not, and if you are, breaking down, or if your head's on the game, then you are going to be a person that needs to be weeded out earlier on. I can definitely see that aspect too, but at the same time, helping people like learn better is going to be more productive long term. Like if you teach a guy how to do something the right way, opposed to just yelling at a guy and then a guy is kind of doing it half-assed, like and then you're asking the guy like, hey, does that part get done? And then their first thinking is like, well, if I tell them the truth and I actually let them know that like I didn't finish that project yet, they're going to be pissed off at me and start yelling at me. So I'm just going to lie and pretend like it is. I've seen guys who had to work on a core and they were missing a couple like down plates. That mean like the two bys that were supposed to meant to like keep the concrete in the core, because it was a little bit off, right? And so the guy asked him like, "Hey, did you get that piece up there?" And he didn't really understand like what it even was. Like he didn't even he went up to that area and was like looking around and didn't understand what was going on. So he was so afraid of the repercussions of being yelled at because he didn't finish that yet, that he just said, "Yeah, he did." And then when the concrete came and the concrete started to rush out of that core, he like asked him like, "Hey, man, I thought I told you to hammer in that down plate, or hammer in that the two by, so that the concrete wouldn't fly out of there." He said, "Well, I didn't even know what that was, and I was just afraid of the backlash, pretty much, for lack of a better term, and that's why I didn't say anything." And it's like, well, that's some of the repercussions of like that negative attitude and that rush to really want to chastise and be angry at somebody. There's going to be negative outcomes to that, because if someone's afraid to tell you the truth, like when you have a autocracy where anytime anything is not done properly, it's either off with your head or get this guy away from me, then you're going to have a lot of guys lie to you. Like you see that a lot of times, like in dictatorships, where everybody around them is now yes men. Nobody wants to tell them the truth because they're afraid of the repercussions. So you see that in construction also. If you make everybody feel like that they have to walk on eggshells around you, then they're not going to be as productive. And I know a lot of these videos are not going to do well with the construction sites because everybody's so tough, everybody's so badass. I see it a lot in the comment sections of all the videos that anybody trying to add like tips and tricks to the videos, anybody trying to like teach younger guys some different things they may not know. Everybody knows everything. Everybody's a professional. Everybody's like did that, done that, and nobody's worth their pay but them. And so there's also that aspect of it where if you're on Instagram or you're on YouTube Shorts and you're just like scrolling down your feed and you see like, hey, here's how to use your square, or here's something that you might not know about, installing like ePay. And then everybody in the comment section is like, this guy's an idiot. This guy doesn't deserve how much money he makes. I could do this job 1,000 times better than him. It's like, well, it's not gonna lend people who maybe thought about joining the trades, or maybe thought, hey, I'm not sure about this, but I might want to venture more into it. If you're already going to be like so like aggressive already, and they just seeing that again, a lot of times, like I said before, a lot of these guys who are so aggressively online talking shit are not the best guys. They're just the guys who are the loudest in the room. So it said, look out for each other. This is something else that, when the guy was talking about like, self deletion and like the high deletion rate of men. I think this is also another aspect that, like, a lot of people are going through things in their life and they may not, talk about it openly, but like you adding on like that extra pressure without, like, really communicating. And it's, I guess, kind of on you too as a person. Like if you're going through a lot of things, it's kind of incumbent on you to like let people know. But at the same time, if you're just constantly like adding more pressure, you don't know how other people are going to react, right? And so if you have a guy like walk off the seventh story of a building, or self-delete themselves when they're at their house, you know what I mean? Like, and you're not going to think that like, hey, maybe I contributed to that. Like maybe like my constant like negative, energy toward this person, constantly beating them down. I know recently there was like some young apprentice who had like killed themselves because they had constantly been beaten down at the job site, and like maybe their home life wasn't good either. And so it's like some people might look at their options at like, well, if everything's terrible everywhere, what's the point of being here? And so I don't think anybody who like would feel good about having that on their conscience, right? And so I think that's something also to look at is like, how would you feel if that was your son, or how would you feel if that was like your daughter or someone you cared about, someone constantly like just like diatribing them to the point that they don't even want to be here anymore. I know that I've experienced that as a young, you know, a teenager, like constantly having that force on you, that negative like force constantly like, constantly hovering over you like a negative like, cloud that's constantly raining negativity on you. It's very hard to concentrate on anything but that, you know what I mean? So I think it's important that we don't add on to that, because again, we all are going through our own things in life. And so I think that it definitely isn't something that we want to have in our industry. Like, well, listen, man, we get paid good, but hey, you might end up deleting yourself because of the work and the stress though. So it's kind of this article kind of talks about, or this post kind of talks about like a guy who was getting drunk a lot and was having a really hard time with alcoholism, and how like he was going to get fired. And then he ended up calling and saying he was checking into, to rehab. And that's something that I've seen too, like where, I've worked with a guy who had a really hard time with alcoholism, and he was like constantly coming up to work like kind of drunk, and then after lunch he would come back and he would smell like booze bad, and he would be like even more drunk. So he was definitely like, self-medicating like in his car at lunchtime, and that led to a lot of dangerous stuff. He had to be let go, and then eventually he went to rehab, and so he, was doing a better job, facilitating, a lot of the things that are going on in his life. But again, when it comes to like alcoholism, when you come to the job drunk, you're endangering not only yourself, but everybody else around you. He was telling guys to, like do certain things that were like they could potentially like risk their lives on. He was like, just like, he was like getting really aggressive, telling people just do it, don't think about it, just do it. And it's like, hey man, like you're not in a good space. And a lot of times as an apprentice, you're kind of just told like not to really think about the whole entire process, just do that what's right in front of you, especially if you have somebody who's competent telling you that. And so that's something else that you have to constantly kind of be aware of too, that certain guys have a different threshold for like what they think is unsafe. Like, don't just slip under the guardrails for a second and grab this. And it's like, well, if I was to fall and then die, you know what I mean? Like, you can't do anything for me. You know what I'm saying? If I was to fall and like break my leg or break my back, you can't do anything for me. I think a lot of guys have to think, just because your threshold and you don't care about your life, that's not the same for a lot of young guys. And if you want to, you're struggling with your demons, you definitely need to be able to, you know, remove yourself from a situation where you're not endangering other people. I think that's really important too. Like if you are struggling with like depression or anger issues or alcoholism, you should get help, because construction's an industry where things happen all the time that where, you can get hurt when everything's going perfect. Now just imagine if people are bringing in like outside things, being drunk on the job, and it just adding more and more to that, the chances of somebody getting hurt, like someone, telling the crane to do the wrong thing and like someone getting crushed. Like that happens all the time too, right? Where, maybe things are perfect and then someone didn't rig something properly on the crane and then something was to fall off. So these things happen, but you don't want to be the cause of that because you were drunk or you were dealing with, outside, things going on in your life. So that's something important too to look at. It says, want to learn to do construction slash carpentry, but I'm not a tough guy or macho. I did some volunteer work for the Habitat for Humanity, learning how to frame houses, and really enjoyed the work. The foreman was really cool and friendly and patient. So I got into the construction labor job, and it was a world difference. Very toxic environment. People were selling drugs to each other on the site, always in a hurry, very confrontational with everybody. And now I'm not a complete square, but it's all job sites like this. I got a job building office cubicles, and that was fun. Learn to read and architect blueprints and use more tools, but it isn't the real deal like knowing how to build a house. How do I learn carpentry? And I think that's something too, like as being like a macho man is falling more and more out of like the cultural zeitgeist. People are doing a lot of other things. They may never have even seen a hammer before. They may never, built something with their dad or had these experience where they can call back on. And so if your standards are, like if you're not tough, if you're not like a macho person, you can't make it in the trades, then we're going to have a very, very small field of people to come from. So you're going to have a lot more guys who are more toxic. And trust me, I've been around a lot of macho guys, around a lot of badass guys. And a lot of those guys are the same guys who are very, very insecure. They tend to like run a little bit shorter for some reason. That's something I just observed. It seems like those guys have a really hard time with life and they want to make everybody feel as miserable as them. And I don't think that adding to someone else's misery is going to make you, a better person or it's going to alleviate what's going on with yourself. So again, there's nuance to these conversations. You know what I'm saying? I think that you can't have somebody who's like mentally weak like around you because again, there are risks and challenges in construction that you cannot leave to just anybody. But at the same time, if your threshold for what can be constructions like a green beret, then I think you're gonna have a hard time finding anybody. And especially, but one thing about even when it comes to like ex-military, at least those guys have like self-discipline. Like you have to be able to control your emotions. One thing I think is really weird is like if you're a badass, but you can't control your emotions, like your guys who, the guys who can't build something and the guys that are constantly throwing their hammers, they're tossing their tool bags, they're walking off the job sites. Those are the guys that I can't understand. Like you can't be macho and be a badass guy, but then can't control your emotions. I think that I don't think those work well together. If that makes sense. How you doing, Smile? And so again, so how do you learn carpentry? I think volunteering is definitely something good, especially if you want to get into the residential side of construction. Like you said, they're going to be a lot more patient, a lot more understanding, just because their money's on the line. And so I think like apprenticeship or like internship when it comes to volunteering is a good place to start. So at least you get familiar. But again, that's why it's so hard, especially for if you want to join like a union outfit. There's not much material online for you guys to look for. You know what I mean? Because again, we don't. There's no one like filming us like breaking down all these things while we're working because we don't get paid for that. So if you were to look like how do I plumb these columns up, or what do I do when the rebar gets poured? Like, what's some of the things I should be doing so that I don't have to be told this task? I can just start. And so, I think that's one thing that our industry, especially for us that are in the more commercial side, we definitely have to start adjusting and getting more onto social media where younger guys can come in and look at some of these things and get a better idea of like how to go about starting, how to go about doing these things, so that they get familiar with these things before they actually get on the job site so they can do their own little homework. And I think that's going to make things a little bit easier, so you're not worrying about like, hey, I have soft hands, but you have all of this background information, so when you do come in, you can do your job. It doesn't matter if you have soft hands, if you've never done this before. If you show up on time every day, if you give your best effort, you're gonna be impactful and you're going to make a difference. Now, if you're a badass, but you're constantly late, you're constantly doing everything your way and you're not following directions, it doesn't matter how good you are if you're causing everybody around you more stress and you're making the job site more stressful. You're not going to be an asset. Hey Billy, how you doing? We call those people's rookies. Yeah, 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 yeah. So this is something else that I've even seen too. Is like I get this stress, but plenty of industries are stressful. I've worked in other jobs, but I consider more stressful that are being more stressful than being a super, and people were not as aggressive. Now, one thing I want to talk about too is an experience that I seen before. I worked for a company, and they had hired like all of their family members, right? So it was like two brothers and a cousin, and then like everybody else, like a lot of nepotism going on. And one of the guys had, uh, he was the superintendent's like nephew, and so he kind of walked around like his shit didn't stink. He could do whatever he wanted. He was super aggressive, and he had taken a guy. A guy was they were like having a prank war back and forth, where like he was constantly like nailing his bags to something, and then he would do the same thing to somebody else, and they're kind of go back and forth. But one day, this guy was having a bad day, and the other guy had nailed his bags, kind of hid them up pretty high, and so you have to get on a ladder and get him down. I mean, it's juvenile and childish, but that's the way some guys bond. So it does happen. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm gonna be straight with you. And so what happened was is that guy had gotten super angry. He had like grabbed the guy by the collar and like taken him by the side of a leading edge and was like threatening him to like throw him off. And everybody in the job site was like, "Bro, what are you doing, bro? Like you're insane. You could kill that guy. Like you could potentially kill yourself too. Like what are you doing?" He's like, "Well, he had my bags and he nailed them up there and he knew that I needed them." And it's like, bro, you're out of control. You need to first of all, if I'd have been the foreman, this is why I was an apprentice, probably I think second term, I would have sent that guy home, and he probably never came to the job site again. I don't care whose family member you are, who were you related to. That shit is absolutely batshit crazy. And also, when you don't discipline that guy, it sends a message that like, first of all, this guy's untouchable, and these are the things that we'll accept on the job site. That's dangerous as fuck. Like I can imagine being the guy who had my collar being held on a leading edge. Now I have to keep my head on a swivel. Now potentially might have to arm myself because that guy was like, fairly big. So now you might have to like actually like, hit that guy in the head with the hammer. Just some wild stuff that probably would never go on in any other industry. And so just seeing that like happen, you're just like, whoa, this is absolutely nuts. And so I think that that shit should be called out. I don't think that calling that kind of behavior out is soft. I don't think calling that kind of behavior out is crazy. I think that guys like that have to be weeded out. If you have extreme anger management issues, if you are to the point that you want to, jeopardize somebody's life and possibly your own, you need to get some help, bro. You need to go to, I don't know, counseling or get on some meds because that was absolutely nuts. Billy says, I know you're a shoe guy. Antonio, please. No. Oh, Trump high tops. Oh my God, bro. The Trump high tops, all those shoes, they look like Payless shoes. I don't get it. But then again, like, hey, like maybe they're collector's items. Maybe they're things that might have, value later on. I wouldn't do it. But then, I mean, even like the other shoes, they look like socks. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Yeezys either, but I mean, they look, really like flimsily made. I don't know. I'm not really into Trump paraphernalia like the NFTs and stuff, but I guess some guys made a lot of money on it, so who knows? Maybe it's an investment vehicle for those guys. So this asks a question. Kicking a toxic foreman off the job site. How do you usually go about doing this? This guy says, I've kicked 4 or 5 people off my job in the 6 or 7 years I've been in construction. And for the most part, everyone stays off the job, but this framing foreman is stubborn. I want to get ideas from some construction people on how to formally go about this. I've already spoken to the owner about him, so it won't be a surprise. I basically just want to send a formal email with a professional tone stating that this guy is incompetent, unprofessional, and toxic to the job site. He creates a hostile environment that affects my team, the subs, and the projects when he's around. How can I mention that I will call the police when he shows up for trespassing? How do other GCs go about this? Looking for ideas. That's something crazy too. Is like I've been on job sites where like the actual GC was afraid of getting rid of a guy. Like there was this younger, I mean actually older guy. He had been like in prison for a lot of years. He was like an active gang member, and he used to constantly like sharpen his tools, like not in a way like to make him efficient, but kind of more like in a threatening manner. Like if something had gone wrong or things didn't go his way, that he might potentially stab somebody on the job because he had like nothing to lose. And this same old man had like driven a boom lift under a garage and like got the knuckle stuck in the boom and almost flipped it over. He was kind of like a really toxic person, but we needed bodies at the time and we had a really tight schedule. So some of the things were kind of like looked over just because we needed, some with a little bit of experience to do things. But then the same guy, like he had another journeyman with him, and they were doing like some siding or something, and then like the guy had actually knocked over his Monster Energy drink while they're in the boom lift together, and he had like hauled off and socked the guy and like beat him up in the boom lift. And when they landed, it was just absolutely nuts. The guy got sent home, but then he came back the next day like he was ready for work again. And it's just like some guys like that are super toxic. And when he got let go, he had to be like talked down for like 2 hours after the job. Like, this person needs to be fired because he's incompetent. This guy has to be fired too because he's a piece of shit. And it's like, that's some of the more extremes that you might see in construction where you have guys who are not willing to take, the two checks with like, some dignity. They want to fight about things. They want potentially want to stab somebody over it. So again, also as an apprentice, keep that in mind that there are some people that are unhinged. Like there are some guys who are actual psychopaths, so that dealing with that, like some gang members, some guys who really don't care about their own lives that are willing to throw it away. Keep that in mind. Like you are going to deal with some unsavory people. I seen this very seldomly, especially with our company kind of weeding those guys out, but it does happen. So always keep that in mind. There are some people that are unhinged that you may be around in construction more than any other industry. So when are might get in a fight with somebody, or you might have potentially, have a conflict, and you have to assert yourself. Know that some of these guys, watch out for context clues. If these guys are constantly sharpening knives, if they're constantly like sharpening different tools and they're not using those, keep that in mind because sometimes you're dealing with some psychopaths. You said you're spending a lot of time on poison in the team, and that's good. Call that shit out and give them a broom. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. And so I've kind of went over a lot of these topics about like some of the negative aspects and what are some of the things that I'm seeing now that are beneficial now. We're seeing a lot more of the unions get involved and a lot more like HR getting involved, even though it's like not great, but it is being more positive, especially if you are like a woman in the trades or if you are a minority. We're seeing a lot of people come in, and so because it's not as a homogenous, work group. You're not just seeing it just be a block of like only one type of people. You have to adjust with different groups coming in. You have to understand that, there's certain things you can say with your boys you can't say amongst other people, and that's everywhere too, right? Like you wouldn't just like start cussing in front of children, or you wouldn't start cussing in front of a large group of like women anywhere else. And so you kind of have to find that balance, like where you're being respectful, but at the same time, like also this is still more of like a rough and tumble industry. So you kind of one thing I do notice is a lot of women that do join this trade, they tend to be more like more industrious, a little more conscientious, and a little bit more like disagreeable. So they kind of like vibe with that. And so you kind of have to find that balance. You don't have to treat people like snowflakes where like, you can't do anything with them. But at the same time, it's just find that balance where you're not just not treating people like garbage just because they're a certain sex or just because they are a certain like, different ethnic background. I've kind of when I first started, I thought that, the trades are racist just because I didn't see a lot of other races in there. And then I started to realize as time went on, it's like, it's not a race thing. It's more of like a preference thing. A lot of people that I know, like when I really started making good money, I would like advocate like, hey, come join the trades. And they're just like, nah, that's not for me. And I'd ask them like why, and I'll kind of push like why and prod, like why don't you want to join? And they're like, well, I just don't find interest in that. So that's something that, maybe if you don't have anybody in your family who's ever been in the trades, or you've never seen the benefits yourself firsthand, I can kind of see why people might hold their nose up to it, especially with how it's portrayed in the media. And so I definitely think that if you are a minority, or you are a, LGBTQ, you might have some struggles with some guys, especially older guys, but as time has progressed, things have gotten a lot easier. And especially with the union being more involved, especially like if you can call your rep, if someone's being like outwardly like homophobic towards you or transphobic, there's definitely avenues to get, guys reprimanded, or be able to just talk to guys. And I think the first thing you should do is pull a person aside first before you get your superintendent or foreman involved. Just pull a guy aside and say, listen, man, I know you like to joke a certain way. I'm not comfortable with that. This is my boundary. I mean, I tell my little son the same thing. There's like little kid songs about like, setting boundaries and being assertive about it. And then I think most guys will respond to that. And if they don't, that's when you take it up to the next step. But going behind somebody's back because you're afraid of conflict, and then not, giving a person a chance to, change their ways, I think that isn't great, because it leads to more like backstabbing behavior. It leads to more like animosity. So give guys a chance to rectify what they're doing. Don't just jump down their throats or try to go behind their back and tell on them. Give them a chance to change. And then if they keep continuing to what they're doing, then that's when I think it's important that you start getting other people involved. Because again, now they've shown a willful, and they've shown that they don't respect you as a person, and they've shown that they are going to keep being, whether it be, racist or sexist or whatever, they're going to continue that on. And I think that's, something that should be, fixed. Your sound is good, Antonio, but an added pop up the volume doubled and then back to normal after I skipped it. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the volume. I have it fairly low. I'm gonna turn it up a little bit to see if that helps or not. I know for a fact that, these kind of videos won't do well, just because, or live stream won't do well because, a lot of guys are more tough, and I understand that. But at the same time, it's not just about guys who are currently in it. It's about guys who will be that in the future. It's about, moving forward, like how can we make things better for everybody, or at least make our industry more approachable for everybody. So that's kind of like my mindset of not just thinking about today, but also thinking about like, what's the industry look like, moving forward? Like, how can we make things better? Because if we only focus on like the short term of like what makes everybody feel good right now, then, we're gonna have more hard times moving forward, especially if, you can't sustain your unions because you can't get guys to join. And so it doesn't matter how much you get paid if you can't keep a cohesive unit together, if you can't keep a crew together, if you can't if you have a crew full of like all 55-year-olds and you have no young people, you're gonna have a harder time. Billy said, I ran a 12-man crew. Only thing I was prejudiced was about lazy, but you have to show that it is required of them before you cut them loose. Yeah, and I think that's something too that I've also noticed, is that a lot of people just have a hard time. I guess just like addressing conflict. People would much rather like run and just deal with it like silently, or they'd rather go tell on somebody instead of just like saying, listen, you're not meeting the expectations, and here's why. Like, what exactly, how are you doing this? Like, let's go through the process together. Like, okay, if I want you to frame this, like, how does your setup look? Like, okay, um, are you cutting everything in a package, or are you cutting everything individually? Are you bringing all your material up at one time so you can just go once your setup is ready? Do you have like do you have a bump there so you can just like slam everything together and just cut it so you're not measuring constantly? Like, why are you not meeting expectations? And I think that's important too, right? As a foreman, as someone who is like in more leadership role, if someone's not meeting your expectations, is it because they're constantly on their phone and they're, hiding, or is it because they're just doing things not as efficiently and effective? And so I think that's important as a personal leadership role. It's up to you to figure out where the inefficiencies are happening so you can make your crew run better and run more effectively. So I think once you kind of get that mindset of like, maybe some of that's on you as a foreman, right? Maybe it's some on you as somewhat as a superintendent. Maybe you could add on to making people more productive by taking some of that responsibility yourself. Because again, if you didn't train somebody properly, you can't expect them to have the result that you want if you didn't give them the tools that they need. And so I even noticed that as a journeyman, we'll have guys come in who didn't learn everything that I learned in my apprenticeship. Like things change. Maybe the schedule, the way things are taught might be switched. They may have gone to some classes where they're learning blueprints before they're learning framing, or they may have learned like concrete before they learn siding. And so just because they're in the same apprenticeship as me, just because they are a certain term, that doesn't mean they have all the knowledge they need. And so it's really incumbent on you as a journeyman or you in any kind of leadership role. You might be a later term apprentice and you're teaching another apprentice under you, different things. It's important that, you set the ground rules and you set like the basics, like what someone should know and how to do it. And maybe you do it a couple times first. And like once you kind of set those ground rules and you kind of set what the expectations are based off your standards, then you can haul off on a person and tell them they're doing it wrong. Because again, you've already shown them. People can't know what they've never been taught before. I'm gonna do one last one. There's something that I wanted to bring up. Um, and I thought this was interesting too. It says, any apprentices here talk back to their journeyman. I'm a second year female apprentice and I get shit on from my journeyman about forgetting something that they have told me in the past and not having tools on me, but they're just as forgetful and not prepared like me. So what makes it okay for them to give me shit? I'm noticing during frustration caused by them, I tend to have a bad mouth and make smart ass comments back when they say something. And I've even told one to shut the fuck up. And I'm starting to wonder if this is something I should seriously work on before I get in trouble. And the answer is hell yeah. The answer is unequivocally hell yeah. Now I understand as a apprentice, it gets difficult when you have somebody who is constantly like on your neck and they're not doing everything perfectly. Um, I've had some journeymen who are forgetful also, and so we're kind of in the same boat. But for you to get super aggressive and then learn some really bad habits of like talking shit back to your journeyman, like some people are not going to accept that, right? So like if you start like making that your modus operandi, like hey, this person has a filthy mouth, this person talks back. You are building muscle memory to do those things, right? And so you have to make sure that you kind of check yourself because everybody's not going to accept that. And some people have like, with the hierarchy, they don't care like, where you were from before. If you have a lot of bad habits and things get stressful, you are going to fall back into those bad habits again. So keep that in mind when you are moving forward. Like, um, negative things tend to like persist more and more, especially if you're getting more negative feedback. And so if I had an apprentice that was like talking hella crazy to me, well, first and foremost, as a journeyman, it's my job to be as prepared as possible. That's not always the case, especially sometimes like I may get a phone call, we might switch gears. I may have had a loadout for a certain task and now we're moving to something else and now we're unprepared because we don't only have the tools that we needed before. So that could happen, but if you're giving a task and you're constantly doing the same thing and then you're constantly forgetting, the fasteners or having batteries ready or having all the tools you need, and then you're constantly chastising your apprentice, I think that's weak. And I think that's not taking responsibility on yourself as a journeyman. So I think you have to check yourself as a person in leadership roles. Again, you are responsible for a lot more and that's why you get paid more. But as an apprentice, it's not a good habit to constantly like, want to be so defiant and so defensive, especially at such a like beginning stage of your career. If you're only a second term or a second year apprentice, like you still have multiple years left to go. And so if you have the attitude or mentality, it's gonna be hard to break those things, especially when you are in your more formative time in your apprenticeship. JB Darrell says the only way to respond to any prank at work is the good old I have a friend kidnap him after work trick. Oh wow. Yeah. I think I think it's I think you can't be soft and be aggressive. I think that's the major issue too, right? Like you being ultra like aggressive, but then having like thin skin, or you being like ultra like aggro, but you can't handle anybody giving you back your own shit. I think that's probably the weakest mentality to have. It's much rather to be like more humble and just keep your mouth quiet if you don't want to have any smoke with anybody. I think that's probably your best bet. For me, I'm the type of person that I love to talk shit. Like if I know you and we're good, I love to talk shit. And if you talk shit back to me, I'm gonna let it roll off my back because I know like we're cool. I only interact with people in that kind of manner if I'm cool with them. And if I'm not, I'm really quick to say, listen, I don't know you like that. We're not cool like that. Don't play with me like that. And that's simple. That's all you gotta do. And as most men, women, most people take that, as a sign of like respect, and they'll take down the chin. But if you have guys who are like, well, this is how I do things, and I'm gonna talk shit to you and do whatever I want to you regardless, then that's when things start getting more wonky, when things start getting more crazy, especially like, okay, if you want to get crazy, we can get crazy. And then now they want to go and like tell a foreman or a superintendent on you. I've seen that happen before too, where, some guys don't want to respect your boundaries, and then things start going left. And then now they want to like, pretty much like call the police on you or call the superintendent on you. I've seen some really weird things when it comes to a lot of these like really macho aggressive men where, they're really cool being the bully, but then once that gets challenged, now you see what they're really made of. Like I said before, a lot of people who are super aggressive are usually insecure. The guys who know what they're capable of are not the guys who are constantly boasting about it, because again, they've been there, they've done that, they know what they're capable of. You know what I'm saying? So keep that in mind. How many weeks should I go taking OT? I'm at full week and I'm going in all the rest of the next week. I mean, I've worked OT for like months on end. It kind of depends on like, what the schedule looks like. You are not required to work OT, but I think there is like a silent agreement with your company that like, if you're not a person that's willing to go that extra step, then when it comes time to be more lean and they are laying guys off, they're going to lay you off first if you're the guy who cannot, go the extra mile. And that's not great, especially if you're a person, who has like trying to find that family balance. But at the same time, you look at it from the company's perspective. If I have 10 guys and five guys can work all the overtime and then five guys can't, and I only have a position for five jobs, why would I keep these guys when these guys have more limitations than these guys? Something to think about, you know what I'm saying? So, and then at the same time, like if this company's not working out for you, you can, find somewhere else to work. You know what I mean? So keep that in mind also. This also sounds like you're fitting in, but communication has to be normally carried out in a manner that doesn't break real world rules. Continue to be strong and persistent, and you'll evolve. Peace. Yeah, I think construction is one of the only industries too in this world where you might see somebody get beat up for what they say more often than not. You know what I mean? Like where words actually have consequences. Where you know you might not see someone take what you're saying with a grain of salt. They may want to throw hands for it. So because again, you have a lot more men, a lot more aggressive men. You have a lot more men from unsavory backgrounds, guys who grew up fighting all the time, guys who were maybe in the military who are not afraid of conflict, who are not afraid of violence. And so keep that in mind too. Like if you're not tough and you don't want to fight anybody for any reason, then don't act like it. And I think a lot of people don't respect bullies. And so if somebody's not giving you that really aggressive energy and you're constantly pushing on somebody, then at that point you're a bully. Like nobody gives any like kudos or any clout to picking on a person who doesn't want to fight or who doesn't want to be aggressive. You know what I'm saying? So just keep that in mind. If you are a person who is respectful, if you are a person who is constantly, keeping other people's like you know, you're constantly keeping other people's like uh, respect in mind, and you're very conscientious, then somebody who's super aggressive with you and you're not doing anything back to them, then people are gonna look at them as assholes. You know what I'm saying? And people are gonna find a way to get them out of here. So keep that in mind. Companies to look for when starting out my apprenticeship at PNCI. There are a lot of good companies. Kind of depends on what you want to do. There are the bigger ones like the Hoffmans, the Andersons, the Perlos, the Least Crutcher Lewises. Those companies do a lot of the bigger jobs. Now there are like smaller outfits like Colas and Bremick who do some of their smaller jobs. Some of those companies do a lot more self-perform work. From what I've seen so far, like Hoffman, Anderson, they have a lot more subcontractors. They don't give as many opportunities for guys to do their own work as far as like framing or siding. They may only have you around for a certain task and that's it. And a lot of times, some of these companies are just glorified like subcontractor managers. And so they may only hire union guys just to do site services. Like I was saying before in my last video, where all you're doing is just worrying about like handrail, like safety requirements. You're there to lubricate the job site, but you're not actually building anything anymore. So keep that in mind. Like on a bigger job, a lot of times the companies to uh, make better profit margins, they're not hiring as many like actual like union carpenters um, as a general. They're more there just to like make sure the job runs properly, but they're not having them do the actual work of building. Says, do you have any experience working with family crews? I'm currently working on a company that is mostly family members and close friends. They rehire me and like me, but still something to get used to. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, when it comes to like nepotism, it's hard because if you were in a position to hire your family members, you probably would. Like especially if like if they're your ward and if you make sure they do a good job because you do a good job, then a company actually it's more advantageous for you to hire like one of your best guys, having them hire somebody who they're going to be even more responsible for. So you can kind of see that happening where like, it's kind of like if you've ever been on a like a sports team and you have a coach and you might have a son that plays the same sport, he's going to be way harder on his son if he's a good coach because not only is there expectations that you do a good job, but then again, you're also like that coach's son. So there's like the extra level of pressure on there that might not be on for everybody else. And plus, they're able to reprimand them in a way that you can't do like outside of like that family dynamic. And so when you keep that in mind, that is something to get used to. And I've seen like some companies like get taken over by one family, right? Like all of these guys have the same work ethic. They've all been raised the same way. And so as young guys get like after high school age, they're just like, boom, bring him in, bring him in, bring him in. Then after you know it, half the crew might be all one family. And so they're going to have like inside jokes. They're going to have the mentality of like looking out for their own, but also it should come with the fact that, they're holding them accountable more. They're holding them to be more responsible. They're not just letting guys who are not working just get a free ride because they have a certain namesake. So I think there's that balance too. That if guys are constantly being let just to do whatever they want because they have a certain name, that's when I think nepotism starts getting really toxic. Absolutely, Don. Tight knit groups and families want to see what you're up to the next challenge. Also, more of a calm environment in tight groups. I think that's true too. Like, one second. When you constantly have, a crew influx, new guys constantly coming in, you're dealing with new personalities, you're dealing with new skill sets, different experiences. It's a lot harder to be as productive and it's a lot more hectic because you don't know what these guys know. Um, you don't know if they're up to the task. You've never seen them in a tough situation. You've never seen if they're accountable, they're going to be accountable, if they're reliable. I think that's one thing that's really big too, and that's why you see some companies, especially medium-sized outfits, they want to keep like their guys constantly going because they're reliable. They know if who is going to be responsible, who's going to come in on time. They have that rapport with them, so it is a lot easier to work with. I've worked with the same company for 7 years, and so because of that, I know almost every single superintendent. I know every single foreman. I've even went through my apprenticeship with these guys, so I had that rapport with them, and they also know that I'm going to show up every single day on time. I'm not going to waste anybody's time. I'm going to do the best I possibly can. And because of that, they keep me going. And so they've invested in me when it comes like the training. They invest in me when I was on the safety committee for a couple years. And so the more you are there, the more you kind of pick up on their system and you kind of get a good idea of like what's the expectations are. And so again, that's a lot better than constantly having the influx of new people have to be taught a certain way, and then they're all getting laid off, and you constantly having this jumbled mess of constantly trying to find that balance of newer people finding out the skill sets they have. And so I think that's one of the better things of working for a medium-sized outfit opposed to like a larger company. There's not that adjustment period, and working with the family is also fairly good, especially if you have a good rapport with them. You can kind of become like a stepson or a part of their community. It's just something that I've done with the company I work for. Um, it's definitely been a good experience, and I think sometimes, especially when you work on a crew where it starts to dwindle down, and you're one of those people who get kept around, it becomes a lot more important that you are dependable, because when you're running a crew where you might have like 4 or 5 guys, each person, it's much more important to that job being finished properly opposed to if you're on a 30-man crew. A lot of people like to work for bigger corporations or bigger job sites because if they're missing, like if they want to call in sick on a Monday or they want to call in sick on a Friday to have a 3-day weekend, they're not going to miss you as much. But on a smaller, more tight knit crew, every person that's missing, you might miss your deadline, because again, a lot of construction companies don't have guys just on standby that if you call in sick that they can just hire off the rip. You know what I mean? Your crew members are going to feel that lack of you being there, not being there. You know what I mean? So keep that in mind when you're talking about like that tight knit group and that family dynamic. When you aren't there, when you aren't doing your job, it's going to affect the other guys, because again, a company can't just hire a couple guys just sit at home and wait for a phone call when some guy doesn't show up. That's not how construction works. That's not how this industry works. And if that guy's more dependable than you, then why not just hire him opposed to hiring you? You know what I'm saying? So keep that in mind when you think about like, how does a cohesive unit work together? How does a good crew work together? Everybody's dependable. You're letting people know that you're not going to be there like with a lot of time in advance, so they can move guys around to make sure that they have the right manpower. And that's about respecting, your crew and respecting your company. And when you get that respect, you tend to get that respect back. And so I think that's something that has really benefited me in my career as a carpenter. It's just having that reciprocity, giving back what I want, and being respectful of all those around me, so that I never have to take it to any kind of wild, places. Louise, working while listen, Louise, work while the work is there, and you can take care of you and your family. So if you're expected, you feel like the pressure, remember to take a day. Exactly. You know, I know some guys who refuse to take any kind of vacation time because they're constantly afraid of their position at their job. I think there are more important things than just your job. So if you're planning on advance, like, hey, I want to go on vacation with my significant other or my kids, I think it's important to do that also, because again, your family deserves some time. You deserve some time to kind of like lower the pressure. As long as you're giving enough in advance, I think you should definitely do that, because it definitely helps me reset. It helps me get a chance to reconnect with my wife, reconnect with my kids. So make sure you are doing that too, if that makes sense. Thanks for the advice. Very helpful and informative. I've been grinding for more growth and experience in becoming a better worker. Thanks again. Yeah. Yeah. I think that all these things come with time, and I think a lot of guys are not better than you. They just been doing it longer than you, and I think there isn't very many things in this trade that you can't learn if you are persistent enough, if you are diligent enough. That this isn't rocket scientist. This isn't rocket science. This isn't something where like open heart surgery. A lot of these things can be taught, especially if you kind of put more effort into it. If you do more research, you definitely can learn these things. There are places where you can learn it, and I think I've had multiple times where people said, hey, can I stay back a little bit of time and pick your brain on something, even though you're not getting paid for it. you're paying yourself and information and knowledge, and a lot of guys will be receptive to it, especially like foremen or superintendents. I've had a lot of superintendents open the books up for me, like, listen, can you show me like what it looks like on the blueprints on what I should be looking for? So say if I don't have the opportunity to talk to you personally, how would I go about finding this thing? And so spending that extra time and investing in yourself will pay dividends, because again, the superintendent or foreman are going to see that you are taking this more seriously than other people. Some guys are just like, hey, I get in at 7 and I might come in at 6:59, and then I'm gone at 3:39. Like I'm walking at the door. So those guys, yes, that's their whatever, that's their prerogative. But the guys who are really successful are the guys who take that extra step, that want to invest more, who want more, and are going to ask those questions. I've had times where I took the whole entire lunch break just to pick a guy's brain, not to eat anything, just so I can figure out like what's the next task, like what are your expectations of me, like how can I be more effective and productive. And I think when you have that mindset, guys are going to be receptive to that, because they want to help those who want to help themselves. You know what I mean? They want to be more they're going to be more receptive to you when you have that mindset, opposed to guys who just like want everything but don't want to give anything. And I think there definitely are those people, and I think that kind of leads into the more toxic nature of construction, where guys don't want to give anything of themselves but they want everything. I think that's something that's going rampant in our society right now. Like I think a lot of people in society right now, they want everything, but they don't want to give anything of themselves. And I think once we have a shift in mindset of being more receptive to being more helping, and then getting more reciprocity back because you're the person that's initiating that help, I think we're going to see it could be better moving forward. Uh, Billy asked, "What's PNCI, Eric?" Oh, PNCI is Portland Pacific, Portland. It's our training center, Portland Carpenters National Institute, something like that. It's something around those frames. Like it's our training center. It's where we go to get the the 2 times every 6 months. That's what PNCI is, and that's where we go. Like if you are looking for a job or looking to talk to an instructor, that's what PNCI is. So yeah, that's more local to us Oregonians. So I think this is fairly productive. I appreciate you guys. Yeah, like I've seen a lot of wild things in my day, but it's not very often. So say you've been in the trades for 7 years, you may have some things that really kind of show out in your mind, like, whoa, that was something wild that I might not experience anywhere else. But they're so seldom that, I mean, they kind of do stay like scorched in your mind. But it's usually not a day-to-day thing. It's not something that you see every day. And if you are seeing like super toxic things every day, I think it might be something where you want to alleviate yourself from that situation, because one thing that I've noticed is people tend to get hurt when there is a constant negative like thing going on at the job site, and it seems to like constantly be like a daily thing where there's constantly bickering, there's constantly fighting, there's constantly the disruptions to the communication, and then eventually that leads to something happening on the back end. And so usually when things are going good, you don't tend to see like those catastrophic things happen as much. You know what I'm saying? Like when communication is good, people tend to like see things before they happen. You're able to be more. You're able to define the problems and define the tasks that need to be done a lot easier, and that comes with more a cohesive unit. When you have more discrepancies, when you have things more in the air, up in the air, and things are kind of like not highlighted the way they should be, that's when you can have more problems. So overall, I think that communicating is important, and I think that you have to have a nuanced conversation when it comes to the toxicity of our environment. Obviously, it's not perfect, but you know we have some unique challenges that might not be in other industries, and we have a unique cast of characters that you might not see in every other trade too. So I appreciate you guys. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.